What's up, beautiful people? It is September the 30th, and boy, we got a lot to talk about. We have a lot to talk about today. The first thing we're going to talk about is the fact that there is a all hands in person senior leadership meeting at the Pentagon where something of on the order of 800 generals and admirals have been summoned to Virginia for this meeting. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the government shutdown. We're going to talk about the fact that today, the largest number or the largest reduction in the federal workforce in the history of our country is happening today. There's 100,000 people whose resignations become effective today. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the fact that on Friday, Sean Puffy, Combs, Diddy, Love, whatever name he's going by now, is being sentenced. So you notice whenever there's something sensational happening that people turn their attention to, that's when big moves get made. So I'm gonna be connecting a lot of dots today. I'm gonna be talking about the onset of martial law and how the White House is using the playbook of Lincoln from 1860 in order to they're basically reverse engineering the Civil War playbook from 1860, and we're seeing it play out now. And then I'm going to talk about next steps, how you need to be preparing you and your family for what's taking place. This is not a doomsday thing. This is not out of fear. You know me. I'm a man of faith. In faith, we are proactive and we are smart and we are vigilant and we are understanding the signs of the times. There's a scripture that says that the sons of Issachar understood the signs of the times. And the signs of the times are upon us. Okay. So let's talk. First thing, there's an all hands meeting. I need to stop saying all hands. It's not all hands. It's an in-person meeting that 800 senior generals are going to. They announced this Thursday. They said it's an urgent meeting. And Pete Hegseth he's the Secretary of War, is going to be addressing senior military leadership. So, of course, this sent ripples throughout the international community because, one, this was the announcement came out when the UN high debate was still happening. All the world leaders, and this is still happening now, but it's less. I mean, most of the world leaders have kind of were here in New York last week. So while all that was going on last week, the escalator situation, all of that, you know that. I don't need to get into all that. This announcement comes down. So the first thing is that, we think at a higher level, people. You have to ask yourself, why was there an announcement made? Because they could have kept it secret. This wasn't leaked. This came directly from the Pentagon. So they're sending a message just by sending a message. You get where I'm going? You see what I'm saying? So you got to look at this higher. All right. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, these generals meet all the time, maybe not to this scale, but certainly this could be done on teleconference. So why do you think they're being called home? Well, we're going to get to that because when I say they, I mean senior leadership from the Pentagon is preparing for a war event at home. That's why they're bringing them home. Okay, so we need to let's connect some dots here. Let me step back. As you know, or maybe you don't, but the Secretary of Defense or the Department of Defense used to be called the Department of War. When it was first established, I believe it was 1789, with the very first administration, there was a Secretary of War, and that went on all the way until 1948. Harry Truman was the president who saw, we need to have a different posturing. And so that was the president who renamed it the Department of Defense. Okay. He was also the president that changed the seal such that the eagle's head, the eagle's head, and you know how the eagle has the olive branches and it has the arrows. It used to be, and I don't remember which one is right and which one is left. Somebody will Google it. But Harry Truman also changed the seal such that the eagle's head was no longer facing toward the arrows, which meant war, and is now facing toward the olive branch, which is what it is now, peace. So that's the history of why it was called the Department of Defense. This was a generation, when I say 1948, this was a generation that saw two world wars in their lifetime. And I think they were understanding something. And that is when you create a war department and you call it that and you prepare for war and you're constantly talking about war and you're on a war posturing, then that's what you're going to have. Right? Some of this is the law of attraction in action, because that's always in action. All right, this kind of concept of where's your focus. So in 1948, and this is around the time of the creation of the CIA and a lot of other departments that began to be involved in intelligence and insights and militarization. It was also this reckoning of let's focus on defense. Okay, all right. I don't want to get too long on that. Now, I need you to know that. So you have to ask yourself, why is it now being renamed, or has it been renamed the Department of War? Now, as of now, I told you something here. The seal is still the same, but wait for them to turn that eagle's head back to the arrows. I'm telling you, that's probably going to be next. So you got to ask yourself, why is it the Department of War? What are they preparing for? Okay. I will call your attention to the fact that in the White House, the president did use the words World War III when he was speaking with the president of Ukraine. All right. Then I just say those words have never been uttered in the White House, in the Oval Office, by a seated president on record, not in front of a camera. You'll never find that. So the fact that was even thrown out, see, you got to be listening, right? Words are powerful. I will, at this point, maybe direct you to look at many of my other teachings and podcasts where I talk about the power of words. This is biblical. This is scriptural. This is spiritual. Words are powerful. Don't let anybody tell you differently. Words are powerful. So they named it the Department of War. Okay. They have already signaled that there are cities in this. So I'm moving to the next step. Cities in America that they want control of. Right. So the generals, I want you to come with me. I'm going a little slower. Go with me for a second. Please forgive me for maybe going a bit slower than some of you would like, but I want us to connect the dots. And I want you to be thinking through this with me. You know, in law school, we weren't taught what to think. We were taught how to think. Okay, so let's think about this together. Maybe I'm missing something. I have an active subscriber base across my platforms. You'll tell me if I'm missing something. All right, but let's go slow here. So it was named the Department of War. You've been hearing throughout consistently, people keep saying, we are ready for there to be action in American cities using military troops. This idea has been floated before, kind of, but now it's happening. It's actually happening. And there's a list that's been given. Chicago, DC, New York, Los Angeles, New Orleans. Right? This goes beyond party. That's why I'm not getting to Democrat, Republican, because if you do that, people think you're automatically on the side. No, this is bigger than that. This is about power. This is about the real-time progression of an authoritarian system and structure. So this is bigger than that, right? And I want you to see it with me. So you've been hearing everybody, I'm talking about, this is senior leadership of the current administration, has consistently been saying that there is a war happening in the streets. They're using these terms in American cities. They're calling it law and order while they want to stop it, but they're using certain, so you got to hear the language. They're using language to trigger, this is where I'm going, martial law. This is why they're saying it's war happening there. They're domestic terrorists, right? They start using those type words. Because what they are triggering is this concept of martial law, which allows the president to declare a state of emergency, and then they can move in troops. So this isn't just going to be passively, sort of like the National Guard, assisting with state and local law enforcement, almost as if the National Guard would come in and help pass out water bottles after a hurricane. No, 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 no. This is full-scale takeover of cities by the military. Now, let me show you. Let me show you how they're going to be able to do it, and how they're going to do it, and how it's being done. Let's step back. This is why I love history. 1860. That's the only other time martial law was declared in this country. Later, the Supreme Court said it was unconstitutional, but it was later. You know, the court has always been late in this country. The court never stands up in real time against power, but it's a whole nother discussion. 1860, right? The argument of Lincoln is that the states and the cities are not protecting federal property. They're not protecting federal bases. In fact, you all are working with militia and local rebels to desecrate federal property. And this is what Lincoln says. So Lincoln sends in troops to protect federal property. That's how the war started. It started with, because you got to see it, right? It started with the president is sending troops to protect property. It wasn't free slaves. I know how history does it. It's so funny. You know, they went to free the slaves and all that. Okay. That's a whole nother conversation, because when the Emancipation Proclamation came down 3 years after the war started, it freed slaves in places that were no longer held by the North. Oh, we're not even going to do that. This was about power and control. I understand it. Lincoln was not going to let states and cities just do whatever the heck they wanted to do. He had a hold on power, so he did something that no other president had done. And he said, I will send in troops to enforce my rule. And so that's what the whole Fort Sumter thing was about. Shot heard around the country. Started the war. Carolina. Okay, all right. So I don't want to get off track with the Fort Sumter story, because that can go somewhere else. We'll go there another time. But this is the point I'm making here. There is a blueprint in place for what we're seeing now. That's why I love history. And the White House is using that blueprint. So what they're saying is, you got to see the language. They're saying federal property is being desecrated. What federal property, you might ask? They're saying ICE facilities. And they're saying the states and the cities are actually working against us. Okay, they're working against us to desecrate federal property. So therefore, we have the right to send in troops. Now, they have not used the word martial law yet, okay? But I will refer you to Shakespeare, who says a rose by any other name, okay, still a rose. So it's happening. They're just not using that language yet, but they're using language to justify the outright militarization of American cities. All right, so let me go back to Lincoln for a second. Lincoln did enact martial law. It was an outright war, so it's martial law. What martial law says is that the city government and the state government, or whatever laws of the city and state, that kind of goes on freeze, so to speak. And the only authority in martial law is the military. And who's the military accountable to? Some general or admiral or senior commander who is accountable to who? The president of the United States. And so Lincoln essentially had control of the cities by virtue of sending in the military to protect federal property. Because it becomes, they're not just going to rally around federal property while you run amok in the city. Right. The concept of martial law is the reason why there's desecration of federal property in these cities is because the city's out of control. The city is in a state of emergency. And so if the city or the state is in a state of emergency, then the federal government has to step in to enforce the will of the president. That's where we're at now in 2025. So this has been a slow broil. The slow broil is these conversations about law and order, these conversations about everybody talking about all this crime happening in these cities. Now, it is happening. So this is the nuance of this conversation. Many of these things that they're saying are happening in these cities are indeed happening in these cities. So we can't say that they're not. And that's a whole nother discussion. But there's a lot of other things we've got to talk about. You know, Victor Hugo said, where there's crime, there's darkness. But instead of looking at the perpetrators of the crime, you should look at those who have created the darkness. All right. So I don't want to talk about people running around the city with pistols and guns. And yes, that is happening. I want to talk about wide scale oppression and systems that have created entire underclasses of people for generations. That's the darkness that creates the fact that the 16-year-old is running around with a gun. If you don't own anything, you don't feel ownership over anything. Right. So that there's that. But you got to hear the conversations that are happening, even in the media, right, which is the fourth wing of government. If you call what we're doing now government. And the media is partly also advancing the story. And the storyline and the narrative is these states and cities are out of control. So there has to be something done. So now, okay, let's put it together. There's a war meeting. That's what's happening. It's a war meeting that generals are being called home for in person today, September the 30th. Let me ask the question again. Why do you think they're being brought home? Don't you think it could be a teleconference? Don't you think it could be a secure communique? Why do you think it was announced that they're coming home? Now, you and I both know that when this meeting is over, it's not like they're going to just all go back to their posts. This isn't 1, 2, 3 huddle, break force and everybody run to their respective positions. No, it is a gathering to prepare for an event on U.S. soil. You got to see what's happening. Now, we've already set it up where people just salute and do what the president says. Who's going to stop the order when the order comes to use military force to seize control of American cities? That you and I have already been watching long before this administration. You and I have already been watching and have seen in a state of dilapidation between Republican and Democrat administrations alike. Because that's the other thing. This is why we talk about darkness, not crime, as much, right? This is why we don't get into parties and politics. We're talking at a higher level. When we talk about the crime and systems of oppression and things, these statistics that they're throwing out about these cities, this is not peculiar to a Democratic administration or Republican administration. This is just like, this has been going on. So you got to ask yourself, why now, and why is this being used as a pretext to seize control of cities? So let's take this out a little further. Okay, I'm going to take it out further, and then I'm going to bring you back.